Are we the fourth? Oh my God.
Yeah, okay.
Anybody wants to join the planning board, please type to us.
All right, let's call this meeting to
You said it paid how much?
0. All right, let's call this meeting to order. Item 1, determining a quorum. We have all 4 members here tonight, so we have a quorum. Item 2 is adjustments to the agenda. Any of the board members have any adjustments? Nope. All right, citizen comments. This section is for comments that are not related to the subdivision that's about to be discussed. Anybody has any other comments? Now's the time.
Yeah, for one.
Yeah.
So I've seen they've been trying to do some repairs on Reed Road.
Okay.
Is there a time, we actually had a discussion on this earlier. Is there a time frame, do you know, of when they're gonna finish upgrading the paving the road? It's virtually undrivable.
Well, you
You gotta use potholes that deep.
I have no idea.
Okay,
That's not the
here's
purview of the planning board.
No question.
Sounds like it's a very serious question. I think the place to direct that is the Department of Public Works.
All right.
I was kind of banking on Will being here tonight so that we could corner him about.
Yeah.
Ah, okay. All right, so item 4 is the pre-application for the Reef Road subdivision. Ms. Klein, would you like to introduce what you're proposing?
Um,
Do you
Yeah.
mind being at the podium if that's all right?
I'm
Just
fine.
just because there's a mic right there.
Yeah, I was just kind of wondering how we were gonna do that.
So if you could just introduce what it is that you're trying to do and just kind of give us an overview of your plans, that would be great.
And I am from out of town, and I thought maybe I'd give a little of my background.
Please.
And I think that everybody has read my plan, but now. Okay, I'm the daughter of educators. My education includes fine art, agriculture, community planning, and historic landscape architecture. After school, I designed commercial interior landscapes and playgrounds before moving to Kennebunkport, where I converted a newly restored 36-room mansion to a bed and breakfast. I raised my 2 children in Brunswick. I have 5 granddaughters from college to elementary school. I'm the widow of Ralphie Klein Jr., who began work with his father when he was 8 years old. Summers they spent on Reef Road, number 301. And they camped in the old house that was there. They did their timber harvesting with horses. 301 was the first property that my husband gave to me. On the very first visit, I felt a special connection. Come to find out, in 1905, my maternal grandfather came and spent the summer on Reef Road with his roommate while he was attending Wentworth Institute in Boston. I have 3 pages in his photo album of Reef Road and the family that he stayed with. It is my understanding that there was a long-standing back and forth with an owner of the property we are talking about tonight. And when I was looking for a new home, the listing was in the real estate, whatever you call it. And the fact that it was a 1770s house with 101 acres really appealed to me. And I bought it from the estate of Stephen Reed. I communicated with his cousin, who was the real estate broker, and his two heirs, Gerald and Larry. So to get to the subdivision, my experience in the last 3 years is that the land that I bought had been in an unstable condition for quite a few years. I had several conversations with a code enforcement officer and with Max. And as soon as they found out that I wasn't going to expand the trailer park, they seemed to warm up to me. I'm proposing 5 2-acre lots, or 4 2-acre lots and a 3-acre lot. 2 or 3 of those 2-acre lots could be expanded to larger lots. I was under the impression I was buying 101 acres with 3 access roads. When I finally came to closing, I had 1 access road and 96 acres. To my knowledge, it has not been surveyed. I had Dorsky and Hartley and Dorsky come up and observe the road. Reed Lane is what I'm speaking of. And then we got delayed. So now I'm working with another surveyor that can also do the road improvements. I want to do the road improvements so that I do not preclude my ability or my heirs' ability to do more subdivision in the future. I have identified on your maps wetlands, vegetation, steep slopes, cemetery that I'm aware of, and the outcropping on the backside of the property. There is a tote road that goes down to the tributary and makes a circle and comes back. The water is flat there. It surprised me. Great kayaking. But that's the interior of the property. And what I'm looking at is to kind of stabilize that neighborhood. And I've talked to several building contractors, and we're looking at houses on foundations, maybe modular, but definitely either retirement or first houses. And I don't know, there's evidence of deer. I haven't seen any other wildlife evidence of note. And the lots are on the existing Reed Lane to what I'm calling the green trailer, which is the last of the trailers that were up there. There's been a lot of interest in the house. The house that's actually on Reef Road and Reed Lane is non-habitable. I had tenants there for most of the 3 years. I spent 2 years trying to get rid of them. And, the house was gutted this winter and it is due to come down. Tomorrow,
Is that the 1770 house?
yes. And the original timbers and the floors, boards were all pit sawed. And we will be retrieving those. But the house has had problems with septic or lack of adequate septic. And I thought I had it drilled well, but I cannot find it. So I'm gonna basically start from scratch and, oh, so tomorrow, the green trailer is coming down. And my assistant and I are going to be weed whacking Reed Lane so that we can get,
You'll have your chance to comment.
okay, so that we can get, the debris trucks up there. And initially, I would like to build a berm between Lavender Lane and Reed Lane to separate the two. And then the other thing, after surveying, I know that I need to arrange with the fire chief to figure out how to move those big trucks around in case of fire. And you can see by the map that the last lot is that green trailer. I've also spoken with the Matthews, who are abutters on Reef Road, and also Matt and Randy Delano on the other side about absorbing either side of the beginning of Reed Lane. And my understanding is that when that house comes down, if I leave it vacant for a year, there will be no more houses there. Those are, so fire. And that house lot is not included in the subdivision. I Xed it out on the map.
So I have a question. This proposed lots, they go partial way back into that overall property? This, I see,
Well,
what's the lot number? 59. It's 96 acres. Is this just taking up the roadside portion?
Yes.
Or
both of my lots are T-shaped. And this one has been, the bottom of the T has been worked on. And what I hope to do is stay within that bottom of the T, not enter the top horizontal section.
So that's not considered a fifth or sixth lot, Matt? By leaving that, if you're saying you're leaving a lot in front along the road, you're making 4 or 5 new lots, and then there's a lot in the back. So what's the total number of lots that we're dealing with?
I believe just from what I'm seeing, it would still be 5, because you would still retain ownership of the big, right? So that would be,
And
And keep the ownership of the along the road?
well, along the road, I hope that lot 4, 5, Delano or Matthew would absorb the road frontage on Reef Road.
And how deep is that? Just out of curiosity, with this scale here,
Yeah, the scale's screwed up.
is it,
It's 211 feet on Reef Road. Which does not correspond with your tax map, which I think is more like 400, but that doesn't reflect the Matthew purchase. And then depth wise, I'm not sure.
so you
but-
get a right of way through, even if you, those pieces go to your neighbors, you have to maintain a right of way through to the rear property.
Yes. Yes, and right now, the house and the garage do not even give me 50 feet, let alone setbacks for those buildings.
You said that, what was the cause of the, just the discrepancy in the acreage and the access? You mentioned that, what
Well,
was that?
I-
Why was that?
I wasn't gonna get into that tonight, but the
I can
broker,
clarify that.
no, I would rather do it. The broker involved
Yes.
was selling the same land to two different people. And when it was my turn to
Yeah.
close,
Right.
there was less acreage, there was half a well missing, and there was a right of way missing.
So there was something nefarious here.
So if I, can I jump in?
Please.
I mean. Those details, I don't think we'll have too much of an
No.
focus on this tonight. I mean, right now, we're just focusing on what is being
Yeah.
presented. I mean,
There-
those are details that would have to,
There's no, what would you call it? There's no gray area to what I own. It's just that I lost out.
So it all gets settled out when you get the surveys done for all the properties.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes, and I have a real deed, an official deed.
Yep.
That term absorbed, I'm not familiar with that in real estate. Is that something that,
Neither am I.
What was that?
the term of absorbed, you referred to a butters absorbing
Oh,
street frontage. I'm not familiar with.
that's probably, if an abutter buys land from a seller, it's not considered subdivision.
I got you. Okay, so that's the idea is your butters will be purchasing the front acreage.
Either
road
the
frontage acreage.
existing ones or the one up above. The two up above, they have a nice view of
Like
the
lot 4
meadow.
and 5, you mean, up
Yes.
above? Okay.
Oh, your abutters are gonna buy the lots in the subdivision.
No, just these lots that really aren't.
The abutters haven't agreed to that, 'cause I'm an abutter, and I know the Delanos haven't either.
No, it doesn't matter.
We're talking to the applicant right now. You'll have your time to comment. This is not a free for all.
If you don't want it. The people up above may want it. I don't want it.
Right.
So, I don't want it long term.
Yeah, so to me, the question is. Is that technically? Another lot that is,
It wouldn't be big enough to be built, well, it might be a buildable lot, but. If it is 211 feet back, but that's not the point.
It's 211 feet on
Overall,
the road,
and we don't have a depth on it.
on Reef Road. And I'm gonna say it's less than 200 feet back.
so it's at least 2 acres,
Well, 200 by 200 is about an acre.
or 1 acre. Oh,
One
sorry.
acre. And it's divided in half by the road, so that it's really 2 additional parcels.
Mhm.
And it does make sense for the people above, because we're on a hill. To buy those and add them as part of their property because of the view factor.
So this is not part of your subdivision application? Selling these separate lots to your abutters?
No, because I want to wait a year after the house comes down so that there will not be a house built there. Which I think is a
Okay,
state law.
So how does that?
is
law
this,
work?
is this objectionable or relevant to the subdivision application, Max?
Well, it's been a serious question that everybody has asked me, what's happening to the house? Can they buy the house? And it's important that people understand they could buy the house and move it, but they can't leave it there because I can't get the road up.
I'm just trying to understand the subdivision application. This sounds like an entirely separate
It
issue.
is, that's why I Xed it out on the map.
Okay. I don't think we need to be concerned with that with
Okay.
regards to your application for the subdivision.
Yeah.
Unless I'm missing something. Max, is there any reason why this is relevant to the application?
I mean, for a subdivision, that only is supposed to count any lots or buildings once it hits 3 or more. That's being leased out or sold. You're talking about the house that's right next to the road that's
Yeah.
next to.
Yeah.
And you're just gonna tear down that building, and then if a neighbor is interested, they could buy it. And if it isn't a butter, that's an exemption for most subdivisions.
Right,
So if an abutter does decide to buy it, then it just means that little area isn't gonna be part of the land survey when it does come for a preliminary plan.
okay,
But, you know, if no one does buy it, then it does have to be part of the land survey,
Okay,
because it's supposed to still capture the whole parcel.
so maybe.
oh, right.
Maybe it would just remain part of the right of way. Or I may be advised that the road is a fee and not a right of way. That I retain ownership of the land underneath the ground, underneath the road.
Mhm.
So the right of way has to be at least 150 feet wide, right? If it goes through to the back.
Yeah, I can pull up the roadway standards for what this will be, but
But that's what's been allowed between lot 1 and 2 and 3 is 150 to 200 feet. Allowed, more or less. Well, if you want a right of way to your back. Does it have to be that wide?
I
all the
think
way
it's,
down?
I think it's 75 feet
75 if it's public maintained. road.
for subdivision, rural subdivision
So even on the main road, 75 feet does the trick.
on off road. We had this discussion with Stan this afternoon.
Okay. You're probably right.
Quick question for you. Just curious, you said that the land was in unstable condition. What does that entail? What do you mean by that? I mean,
My
the roads all,
understanding is that there were in excess of 20 trailers at different, over a period of time,
20.
in and out of there. There were, according to Stan, 2 legally certified septic fields, and yet there were, the first time I saw the property, there were 4 trailers up there.
I see.
Could I ask, you talked about what you are hoping the homes end up looking like. Are you planning on building the homes or are you just gonna have some sort of covenants on the lots?
They're gonna be for sale. And I have an understanding with builders that if they wanted to build on one of those lots for sale, that they would give me a deposit and I'd wait until the house sold. Depending on who you talk to, either the houses are gonna go like, or the lots are gonna go quickly, or they're not.
Okay, yeah, you never know.
No.
So. What's the question? Oh, you mentioned something about a berm. Where
Oh.
was that?
Mr. Hunter has a road that
Outer
is
lane.
Lavender
The
Lane.
property that she's talking about, I'm gonna clarify this because there's some phases here. So Lavender Lane was the main entrance, and this is the other, another resident, my neighbor. To what's now known as Reed's Lane. So Reed's Lane used to make a whole loop around. Somewhere in the process, as we bought the property 3 years ago, there was a change in the name of our section of the road, and this was instigated by the township decided to make the change, the name change. Stan couldn't give me the complete answer because it was convoluted, he said. So, I didn't push, name came through as Lavender Lane. So Lavender Lane is actually the entrance to all of this property. The property that she's talking about, that gray property, the parts that's missing is my property. I have 2 lots, a 5-acre lot and a 2-acre lot. Those are the parts that she's claims are missing. It is surveyed, is deeded to us. The road belongs to me. On the deed, all the properties, with the exception of Mrs. Klein's, have a right of way to that lane. I maintain the road, I plow the road. I do everything required by, as a good neighbor, to do the road. So the part that's missing, there, whatever she claims or that she got bamboozled. The original house on the property, the oldest house, actually, one of the oldest houses in.
Can I stop you right there?
Sure.
What does this have to do with anything that we're talking
It
about?
has a lot to do with because she's talking about putting a berm across the road. Which is right now a safety issue because it actually allows. The fire trucks to turn around. If she puts a berm there, there's no place for the trucks to turn around. There's no place for the garbage truck to turn around. Nothing happens, it shuts it down. Second of all,
Wait, you could,
okay,
you're
let me
proposing-
finish. That berm crosses a right of way that's deeded to us. To the well on this other side of the road.
No, it doesn't. The
So,
well is
excuse me,
far up.
sorry, if I can jump in, so.
Yep.
Go ahead.
So I just want to quickly point out how meetings should be conducted. As the chair, Brendan is the one who's supposed to call on people to speak at that time. We've had some problems in the past where there is some back and forth, and that doesn't do anything more than just hold the meeting up a lot longer over just minor items that could be addressed when someone does speak their whole point. For what, if I can just quickly jump in on the berm.
Please.
So the easement item that you're just talking about with the berm, that is something that would come up in the preliminary plan when Shirley does her survey, and that would be based on what deeds are available at that time. I mean, that's all I can really say. And for the point of the fire truck, Chief Smeltzer will have to go up and he'll have to confirm the safe. I assume you.
I've made
A reminder email.
2 suggestions for turnaround.
When Chief Smeltzer has to go up and he has to confirm all this, if this would in fact impact the Lavender Lane one, he would have to weigh in on that as well. If that's making it so it's impossible to do on Lavender Lane, that would be part of the consideration for the board during the preliminary phase.
I still don't understand what this has to do with anything that we're talking about.
Because I cannot use Lavender Lane according to Mr. Hunter.
You're
But
don't seem to be proposing to use
people-
Lavender Lane.
People in the neighborhood can walk their dog, cut Christmas trees, hunt, et cetera, on my property. If everything is going to be by the book, I don't want guys with garbage coming up Lavender Lane, driving onto my property and dumping.
What does this have to do with the subdivision?
The subdivision is gonna be separate from Mr. Hunter's property and Angela's property.
It sounds like this is a dispute between all of you. It has nothing to do with the subdivision whatsoever.
No, but my understanding also was that this was a meeting between you and me.
It is.
Okay,
The public is allowed to come in and comment on the application.
well, we're getting
I'm trying to understand.
sidetracked.
It
Well, we
seems,
can't comment without better information. There's no information about Lavender Lane in front of us anyway, so if we can't even move, you can't move forward until you have, I'm sorry, I interrupted you,
Please.
until you have a survey. And those lots are sellable, so you have seems like you have a lot of research to do. to get to
I
that
do.
point.
And that's why in my conversation this afternoon, I said this is a pre-application.
Mhm.
This is not a time for this type of discussion.
Mhm.
And I have been preoccupied with cleaning up trash.
Mhm.
And I am continuing to do that. I also have been advised that I may sell one house lot before subdivision.
I believe that's the case.
So I'm just here to mainly say Reed Lane is all I have to deal with. And it does go up and take a right angle on what may have been a continuation of Lavender Lane when it was part of the neighborhood. But it's not, it is Reed Lane. It is not Lavender Lane.
Mhm.
And there's no reason why there can't be a fence, a gate, something. Right now, I am dealing with neighbors that come onto Reed Lane and park and enter their house. But I'm not allowed to come up Lavender Lane to get to my road. So it's not necessarily tit for tat. It's more what is legal. And the trash problem is real. And it just doesn't stop. And that would be one reason why I would have the berm, and Lavender Lane is not my problem. Lavender Lane, I think your driveway goes around in a semicircle. My problem is that I've got a lot of road in. I only have land on one side. So these 5 lots, with the exception of one, are all on the uphill side of Reed Lane. And I would like to be able to earn any income from that subdivision back into the road development and privacy issues and that sort of thing.
Okay. Just for you and everybody in the room, it's not the role of the planning board to settle property disputes. That's the job of the courts. You all can fight about that all you want.
There
doesn't
is a
seem-
dispute.
It doesn't seem to have any, the problems that folks are having here doesn't seem to have anything to do with the subdivision. You, of course, have the right to develop your property. You just have to come through the planning process in order to get our approval to chop your lot up the way that you see fit. You know, it sounds like there's a lot of contentious issues going on, and we can't really do anything about that. That's not what we do.
No, I'm not, but it does. It is the reason why we have people here tonight. And the idea of the berm on my property, not on his property. And he has a right of way. If he decided to hook up to the well that is existing on my property, that would be his responsibility to dig through the berm. Or the berm's not even gonna be there. There's a stone wall where the well is.
Again, this doesn't have anything to do with your subdivision as far as
It
I can tell.
doesn't.
I'm only wondering if this is a loop for the fire department to come through and go around. I mean, that would be part of what they would look at.
Well, I'm
Getting the
planning
emergency
on,
vehicles through.
I'm planning on either a 70-foot radius circle for the fire truck or a T.
We're at the far end of lot 2. Is that where you would put it?
Well, that's one possibility. The other is beyond the green trailer lot, which would be 1 and 2.
That's two.
Oh, okay. There's a grade problem there.
Okay, well, you have that, and I'm sure that you'll talk to the fire department about the best way to get emergency vehicles in and out.
I think a professionally done survey might go a long way. Just to get everything.
Well, and that's
That-
scheduled. My understanding again for this meeting is, hi, this is me. I'd like to do that. And you would advise me.
Right.
So the survey is expensive,
Right,
and right now I'm spending my money on garbage.
right.
But yes, as soon as I get not a flat no, Mike's in the wings waiting.
Well, if the lot is as big as you are suggesting from this map, it certainly doesn't look like there's a problem. The lots are generous enough. So that's what a survey will tell you, is that you've got this kind of room.
I mean, based on the information that's been provided, I don't see any reason why this wouldn't be approved once, you know. You go through the,
And I will
plan
confess that my 400-foot, 200-foot measurements I did with my 300-foot tape.
that's fine, that's,
So
this is
it's-
exactly the level of detail that we're
It's
expecting.
possible.
Right.
And I am aware that I'm treating that drainage that comes down into the Matthews property as something that needs 75 feet on either side of it.
Could I ask a dumb question? I've always wanted to know why that road was called Reef Road. Anyone know? Is that a family name or where's the coral reef?
Might have been off the Madomet River, maybe.
So
Could have been a reef.
the road dates back to
Oh, yeah.
17, earlier. So
It was a doctor.
when actually our property I sent a copy of the original deed. It says Massachusetts,
Yeah.
and that road was there then because the house was built 8 years before Maine became a state on its own. So the road's been there for a long, long time. And of course, they had the granite was mined up on the hillside for decades. On the first part of the road there, so
So no one knows.
no one knows exactly.
You have Madomet Falls, which is on the maps.
Yeah,
And we just think that there was probably a reef somewhere along
the
the
river,
river.
so, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
I
thanks.
used to claim an ancestor was named Reef, but never went anywhere.
John Adam Reef.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do we have any other questions for Ms. Klein?
Should I just explain the subdivision process since a lot of
Sure,
people
yeah.
probably knew everything, so. We haven't done subdivision in some time, and it's only so rare that we've had a subdivision start from square one. Right now, there's 3 phases. This is the pre-application phase, as Shirley's mentioned. It's really just this is what I'm thinking, this is a concept, hand drawings are fine. It's just to give an idea for how many lots might be happening in the future. What the access would possibly look like, if it's gonna be a new road, if it's gonna be an upgraded road, if it's gonna be a public road. And then you have your beginning with habitat maps, in case you see any concerns about some of the wetlands that were identified on here. Just keep in mind for that, or if there's any other questions really amongst the board, you've done a pretty good job about that. I think when looking at the beginning with habitat maps, the only one that I see is very close to the road. You'll see it's part of that little bit that was Xed out. So,
That's that drainage that, you know,
right, so
Yeah.
if it ends up being sold to a neighbor, it's probably not even gonna be that big of an issue since it wouldn't be part of the subdivision. But regardless, looking at all that, it's just to get an idea for this application. And if you have any red flags, you raise it now. The board is not committing anything tonight. You're not approving anything. You're not saying you're gonna approve the application if X, Y, and Z are done. You're just saying, make sure you keep this in mind, keep doing that. The next phase, which is the preliminary phase, probably won't happen for several months. I don't know if Shirley already has a timeline in mind, but I don't expect anything to happen until late this year. I'm talking maybe November, December, maybe even 2024. Again, unless Shirley already has a surveyor, an engineer, everyone already lined up and starting to work on this. So Johnny, your item on having a survey done of the property, that is something that's required for the preliminary plan. Because the preliminary plan will be something presented to the board that's going to be a 90% complete document. And when that happens, the moment I get that in my hand and I'm told this is my preliminary plan, it's going to the planning board, I immediately will then have to send out ads to the newspaper as well as notices to anyone who abuts the property as it currently is. So people on Lavender, like I don't have every single person listed right here, but
It's Angela. and
yeah.
Right.
I assume most people in this room actually will probably get a notice in the mail saying that the plan is coming to the planning board. And then even that night, if it's approved by the planning board, it would go to the final phase, which is taking the public comments, it's taking the final bits and conditions of approval from the planning board. We have one more public hearing night, the final plan, which if everything's fine, it would be approved and then signed by the planning board that night and then sent to the registry of deeds. But as I said, from where we are tonight to that final plan, we're probably gonna be at the March, April meeting probably of next year. There is going to be a long time. There's always cases where people will start pre-application and then things will fizzle out and they just won't do it preliminary. But it's happened many times, whether subdivisions, site plan applications for business, it happens. So tonight, it's pretty much just asking questions from the planning board to the applicant to the planning board. If there are other comments from the citizens, it's really up to the planning board on how much they do want to have that discussion. But I just wanted to make sure that was cleared up with everyone.
Mrs. Klein, is there anything else that you need from us as far as information about your proposal?
Stan and Max did a really good job at educating me. This has been in the making for quite a while. And I've just now been able to turn my attention. Well, last winter we started picking up trash. I think I'm okay.
Okay.
And as long as Max is.
We won't let him leave.
And it's pretty, I think it's pretty straightforward, and I appreciate that your town does not have major convoluted rules and regulations.
Okay. Well, thank you for your presentation. Are there any other public comments about what's been proposed then? Yeah.
I don't know, just mention that you had seen, just deer. But where I live there, I see like the bears, we have a pair of bald eagles. We have, so many deer, so many baby deers. So this subdivision would really impact the wildlife. I'm wondering, is there a plan?
There's a
Or-
wildlife corridor.
Yeah.
Planned around that drainage that eventually comes down through your path. And I would say, knowing that you're a city, that deer will walk along your foundation wall if they feel so inclined. And they are coming from a large empty tract of land to maybe the meadow across the street. And they'll go right through it.
So we didn't look at the that wouldn't factor in, like,
Well, it could,
there would be no extra protections, or did you say that there were? I didn't hear you.
well, a wildlife corridor is something that my property in Brunswick was part of. And we just said, okay, we're gonna take this 300 foot, 200 feet, whatever it was, we're gonna make a continuous uninhabited trail. And in that situation, the land had been farmed and then vacant and was a woodlot. And it was very obvious where the wildlife trails were. So we just took it from the water source up through, and it goes way up miles in Brunswick. And that's something else that I didn't think of, but there's snowmobile or ATV trails going through my property, and I assume that that is kind of free flowing. You know, that people do that.
Yes.
You'd have to post
It has to
it.
be posted.
If it's not posted, then I think people do take free.
Well,
Which they did before and.
Yeah.
Sorry.
yeah,
One of the things that concerns me is as I told Max earlier, I'm okay with this. I'm okay with the subdivision. I just want, and I think most of us here are okay with it as long as it's done properly. So there's two things that haven't been brought up here. So you brought up the wildlife. I really think there should be most people don't know this because as people who live there, we don't advertise the animals that we see. We have quails up there. On the back of her property that she talks about the ledge. That's a den there.
You have what?
Wolves.
Wolves?
Yes, we have red wolves.
I,
Red wolves and coyotes. They have a den up there. They're actually endangered. That's on her property up in the back corner. The deer, do you have bear down your place?
We did.
Oh,
we did.
So the way,
Anyways, so I think that there should be some more discussion environmentally about what's going on here, because I think it's important. That's why most of us moved up there, live up there, is because even though it's part of Waldeboro, a town, it's only 5 miles from my place to go shopping. Everything that you would want to have is there in nature, if that's what you want.
So extend your lots to my back property line.
Well, so the thing about that is that. One of the other, when I say do it right, there's gotta be communication. If you don't want to talk to me, you don't want to have a conversation as an adult, I'll give you my lawyer.
Okay,
So
all right.
from there.
Look,
That's simple.
we-
Am I wrong here, guys? No. All right, so you can shush us. But I'm putting it out here right now so that you guys know. That this isn't going to go quietly, even though we all agree that she's entitled to build her place the way she sees fit. It's not funny. It's not funny. We live there.
there's a
You've been
legal,
there for 3 years.
hang on, everybody.
Go ahead.
We have a legal structure. The way to manage this exact situation, all right? It'll be resolved according to the law,
Good.
all right?
That's all we're asking.
Perfect.
But there's, it's not just the town of Waldeboro that's involved here. If you're gonna bring in that, environmental, so since we moved in there 3 years ago, as it turns out. She's right. People were hauling garbage up there. Angela? There's truckloads, literally garbage, because there was no control over the road. Nobody lived there. Just who would stand up and stand in front of the vehicles and say,
The police department.
turn around. No, that doesn't.
Folks, this doesn't have anything to do with the business for this board.
The police department knows who it is.
No,
That's fine.
no, they don't.
Does anyone have any comments related to the subdivision?
That is
No,
related. to
I-
subdivision.
It's there to the police department. They do know,
So,
you know. you
excuse me,
have your
Shirley,
Stay
I'm
there.
so. When Brendan is saying what is related to the subdivision, he's talking about the plan you see before you. The disagreements that are before you, whether it's selling the lots, the property boundaries, all those disputes. You can all talk about that in the lobby outside, because those all are civil matters at that time. What the board right now is concerned about is the process and what would eventually be approved. If the boundary lines are something that are disputed, that would be when we are getting a survey in the preliminary phase. And as I said earlier, it might not get to that phase. They do not know that. The garbage disputes, all that. The police department is outside, first door on the left. You may go do that right after this meeting. I'm not stopping anyone.
I've
And
done
if
it.
you have,
I've talked to specific police people. They know who was doing the garbage truck. You know, it's just that
We're ready, we're good with it. Like you said, we're good with you. Putting up a subdivision, we welcome it. But with limitations.
well, and I would think that, you know, 10% of the property is very reasonable.
Yeah, they're conservative. I'm with
I think that I found it very offensive to have somebody approach me and give me an insane offer and a lot of advice. And yes.
Hey, you came and knocked at my door. You don't have.
Folks, I think we're done here.
Yes, subdivision.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're discussing the drainage, and maybe this would be a question for this meeting. And I see the drainage right here from the subdivision to my property, so it is on subdivision. That pipe that's on Reed Lane is, that is part of the drainage is completely, rusted out. And so, I know, I know.
And I have
It's
put rock
exposed.
across it.
Yeah, I know that, and it's exposed. My concern is, you mentioned that you're gonna be moving the trailer tomorrow. Are you going over that drainage? Cause I'm afraid it's gonna kill my. Oh, no, they're tearing it down. Okay, so it's not the pulling it apart. Okay, so you're not gonna be like bringing big trucks
it.
over
Will
there.
never last.
Well, that's what I thought. I was
It
like, oh
was
my
gonna
gosh,
grate.
and then that would all be replaced, right? You would replace all that drainage pipe for the subdivision.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right now, I got with my own pickup truck 5 loads of 6-inch rock to fill in that. And yes, tomorrow there are gonna be large trucks going over that. I'm gonna be up there with my assistant, probably 9 o'clock in the morning. We're gonna weed whack that whole place. The excavator's coming down.
They're
and
going
it's
over
gonna-
the Reed Lane. Sorry, I'm just trying to keep up.
Reed Lane is open. I have
Right.
always driven up and down.
Okay, I just wanted to, because, so if that caves in, the drainage, then that will be fixed.
It's a culvert you're talking about?
Yeah,
culvert.
it's.
On a town road,
Is it?
No,
No,
it's
no,
on
that's
Reed
private.
Lane, and I
Reed
made,
Lane is a private
and I
road.
made point out that you know about that because you have been up there.
well,
And that's okay with me. I just have problems with this gentleman here that walks his dog up my road, but I can't drive up.
Right, I walked up it the other day to see why we were flooding, because we were flooding in our yard.
The rest of New England.
Oh my God, it was so bad.
I know.
Yeah.
All right,
And
folks,
that's why it's
we're gonna move on.
wildlife corridor.
Thanks for your time.
Use that.
Okay,
all right.
thank you very
You've
much.
got other things. to
Thank you.
We do.
And if you asked a question, please make sure to talk with Rebecca in the back, just so she has your name for the minutes. Unless you're all set there. Yeah, Rebecca's behind you. All right.
Is
Just-
Rebecca our new Susan?
Yes, well, I'll go over all that during the,
Shoes to fill.
I guess Barbara wasn't here. when I said that.
No.
I can go over that during the
Okay.
last little bit there.
All right, so item 5, minutes from June 8.
Woo-hoo.
I was not present at this meeting, so I'm gonna abstain from the vote, and I have no comments.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments?
This is, did
My line.
anybody else think
This is
that
not.
section, could you guys speak
Yeah.
outside,
Yes.
please? Since we're still meeting, thank you. Did everybody else think that section 3, the second paragraph? Where in the middle it says the spent water drains out the front doors and trickles to the river in a trench. Did it really say that? Did we really say that that was what happened? Or did he just say goes in a trench and, eventually goes to the river? It wasn't it's not a built trench to the river. It was my impression.
I feel the way he described it was, like the water would maybe build up right out in front and then it will like slowly but surely, if one day in the near future will hit the river.
Right. That was my impression, and that belies that impression.
Not like something was constructed. It doesn't,
Yeah,
that
what
wouldn't
was
make
that?
sense either.
is that how you remembered it?
Yeah, I don't
Just-
remember a trench necessarily, but
I would just say trickles to the river in a race in a trench. Because it's just going out onto the
So you're talking,
grass,
on the lawn.
working its way down.
so you're talking the second paragraph of item 3 where it starts. 1, 2, 3,
The spent water drains,
fourth line, the spent water drains,
it just is
just get rid of it
misleading.
in a trench.
I think that was my only comment I had.
If it actually was a trench, then they may have elvers coming up that trench to into their,
And jump into their trays.
that'll be awesome.
That's all I had.
Didn't have anything else.
Got it?
No, it looks fine to me.
All right, we have a motion to accept the minutes with the amendment to, what are we doing, deleting the words in a trench?
Mhm.
I make that same motion.
A second.
All in favor?
I,
All right. Minutes are accepted as amended. All right, item 6, ordinance revisions.
So, just some context getting into this. So the state passed LD 1706, which grants towns like Waldeboro a 1-year extension to implement LD 2003. This is the housing rule that I always talk about. I think that the meeting in so much delightful cheer. What you have is pretty much me incorporating those as well as any minor tweaks I may have received.
so everything in orange was related to LD
Uh,
03, or is it a mix?
There's some notes of stuff that is not related to.
Yes.
2003.
I either have that in parentheses saying not an LD 2003, which is more of a suggestion that I'm making, or it might tie into the town's climate resiliency partnership, where there's just some recommendations for the town to address some action items that the state has passed down from the governor's office of policy and innovation. I can never remember the whole thing, but it's GoPIP, like it's temporarily like the planning office where they're just thinking of climate resiliency. So, and I can go over that in more detail later. Yeah, should I just go through these items one by one? A lot of this we've kind of already discussed. I think a good chunk of the discussion is just going to be how you want to fine detail the standards and the definitions. And 1 or 2 big items later on.
I have a question, Matt, just for clarification.
Yeah.
The definition, this may sound like a dumb question, but the shoreline zoning, is the definition of shoreline? The ocean, is it lacustrine, is it ponds, is it riverine? What actually entails or includes when you say shoreline zoning uses?
It's pretty awkward if we don't have that in the definition.
Well, I would think, is it the same thing?
You have-
If it's a pond versus the ocean versus a river versus,
Okay,
I was just thinking of that.
so shoreland zone is defined in our ordinance. Thank goodness. The land area located within 250 feet horizontal distance, the normal high water line of any great pond, river, or saltwater body. Within 250 feet of the upland edge of a coastal or freshwater wetland, or within 75 feet of the normal high water line of a stream.
Okay, high water.
So I have a similar question.
Okay,
Where is the stream protection zone defined in the land use ordinance?
I don't think that on there.
It's not in the definitions, I believe.
So that's a correction I'll have to make, but it should be. I'm just looking all over this place.
We have a definition of a stream and a stream outlet on 1527.
So,
And I flipped through some of the sections, but I didn't do a,
so the definition is found on page 6-4. This is 6.6.11.6. So I'm gonna have to.
Gotcha.
Have that definition. And people can reference it, but I don't have to go through the whole thing.
Mhm.
And it's actually a bit different from, I don't know if anyone caught that earlier, where Shirley was saying, making sure there's gonna be 75-foot width along that wetland that was discussed earlier. It's weird because we have our stream protections zones defined, but the state also will. There have been cases where I've talked with DEP and they will also require a permit if there's some development happening within 75 feet of the stream, even if we don't have it in the stream protection, so I'm not too sure on the whole thing, so just wanted to add that little clarity.
So that's
That's a definition.
that's the reason why you've got the footnote number 4. That's referring to footnote number 4 on page 6-17. Basically saying that if you're gonna build an accessory apartment within the stream protection zone, you need a variance from setback requirement from Board of Appeals. Okay. Thanks.
So I'm gonna make it.
What page is that with all the black out?
Six-
that you have
16.
there? 616?
That's the land use and the shoreline matrix.
I think they have the same thing as everybody else has. Oh, so they do. Is that as broad? Okay,
That's
yours. is on the
Here's
left
on the
side.
basic page.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Odd number is supposed to be right.
How are they?
I don't know.
That's as of tonight.
Right.
Should I just go through it article by article or?
Yeah,
Okay,
have at it.
so first, Article 6, the land use matrix. We don't really have to make any change to the land use matrix itself. I have had a request from someone who's interested in buying a parcel in town, if we would consider amending the ordinance to allow campgrounds in the Route 1B district, which is the corridor area between the top of the hill over here and essentially Minnie's Diner.
Top of the hill, the top of the hill.
A campground, like for
Campgrounds,
big campers.
campground, RV park.
Hmm.
I mean, if it is something we would have, it would be planning board approval, so to be consistent with what the district has. If it's something they want to.
I'm confused next. Where exactly are you talking about? What area of land are you? Are you
So,
intimating that this could be an RV park?
so. In town, we have the entire area along Route 1 split into 2 districts.
Yes,
Between the top of the hill, if you're going towards Damascotta,
right.
and the top of the hill, if you're heading towards Warren. Yeah, or Moody's.
Oh, Moody's, okay.
So.
Like these are else.
The River Valley.
Yeah. You're going down one hill and then you're gonna go up another hill.
Right.
So, I'm just gonna say as landmarks, do you know where Coastal Nutrition is or where the
Yes,
creamery? So from that point to Moody's Diner,
right,
between that area, it's a majority of it is this Route 1B district.
right.
And then outside of that. From Coastal Nutrition to the Noblesboro Town Line, and then from Moody's to the Warren Town Line, that is Route 1A, where campgrounds are allowed.
Right.
But from Coastal Nutrition to Moody's, going through this area, right in front of the town office, the gas stations, all that, that's considered Route 1B.
So they want a waiver to put a,
They would like the planning board to consider amending Article 6
Yeah.
to allow campgrounds in this stretch along Route 1. And that's not really a decision you have to make tonight. It's just something that,
Something.
Can we make that on an individual basis?
no, it's like,
Well,
no, because
The zone's a zone and.
zones is zone,
Things in it
and
and things not.
for Article 6, it's pretty clear. If it's blank, it's prohibited. Right. And no matter how, anyway, I could just,
okay,
so again, nothing has to be decided tonight. Unless the board wants to say no, but it's just something I wanted to put out there.
Changes like that, I mean, people can. I mean, obviously, it's in their own interest to be able to do that on their property that happens to be in a zone that doesn't currently allow it. So what is it that would drive a planning board to say, it's been this way so long? Person X says, hey, wouldn't it be cool if it was a different way? What makes us decide one way or the other to say, okay, well, we've had it this way so long. It's allowable in these other areas. Let's throw this thing in there too, and how do we, that slope of slip, how do we determine that?
Really, it's however you would like to have those discussions. The Waldeboro Inn, for example, when they said, hey, you're updating your ordinance, would you consider going from 5 to 8 for a bed and breakfast? You heard a presentation from them. People wondered why on earth is 5 the limit?
Right.
And it was just a decision from there.
and I think the Moody's to the nutritional that was supposed to be kind of dense businesses, whereas a campground is slightly more rural and just a
Mm.
summer, warm month kind of thing. It just has a
Yeah.
different flavor. That was
Sure.
probably the original reason, but didn't have to be.
Yeah, I'm just curious about.
Yeah.
Me, I agree with Barbara. I like it's a catch-22, but it'd be nice to be able to decide it on an individual basis so you could see it. How it would present itself. But I guess, like you say, a rule's a rule.
Yeah, then you're presented with that. Essentially free for all, not that that's a bad thing necessarily, but
Right.
throughout every location and zones become, well, I have zones.
Irrelevant. yeah. Can I ask a question? Speaking of development in the Middle Valley, so the gas station expanded, Deb Steiner disappeared, and we have pavement. Don't they need to have a water management plan, or any of that? I mean, that's like 90% covered with asphalt, right? The 2 lots put together. And they need a stormwater management plan or something, or is that just Stan's department?
Yeah, that's Stan's department, I think, because I don't know the full details of it, if I'm being honest, but I believe from what I recall speaking to him about, it's pretty much demo and something from the gas station, no, I don't believe a permanent structure is being put up there.
No, but it's all hot topped and, it's.
Curious
on the
how
river.
much more there actually is than was before around the diner. I mean, the diner, of course, is impervious as well.
Yeah.
So I wonder how much more there actually is.
I think it was kind of a dirt driveway before. It was not hot topped in front of Deb's, but anyway, just wondering,
I think it was tar, but
was it?
that's just my opinion.
Yeah,
I can't promise it.
I don't have any photos,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Good
Okay,
question.
so where were we?
Article 6 for the campground, I don't know if there are any more questions around it, or if we want to move on to everything else, and you guys could just think about the campground for a while.
Yeah.
So to actually get to LD 2003 changes. There is one change I would put in the shoreland zoning uses, well. One required for LD 2003, and then one is an optional one. So accessory apartments, that's something I wanted to clarify with. The state first. Accessory apartments are something that should be in LD 2003, so I just wanted to put down accessory apartments in there just as a clarifying item. Single family, multifamily, it's all already in there, but I wanted to just have accessory apartment in there, just to clarify that. CEO in the residential, commercial, general developments, similar to most developments. And then I would just have it for the stream protection and resource protection, just because that's the more strict areas. But, I mean, the actual approval process, it's up to you. And then commercial fisheries would just be left open because that's solely the town landings.
Mhm. I don't see any reason why the planning board needs to be approving every individual accessory apartment.
Okay.
I would agree that, you know, stream protection, resource protection makes sense, but.
Max, the one short-term rental. What does that entail, as you understand it?
Those are Airbnbs essentially. So someone who, so it's like an apartment, someone who's gonna rent it out for maybe a weekend or a week.
Right.
And then someone else will be there for next weekend or
Is,
something.
is there a statute of regulation in the town of Waldeboro regulating them?
No, and that, well, yeah, not required, more voluntary, and that was actually what I was gonna get into later about LD two.
Okay.
But just to quickly get on Brendan's note and the accessory apartment. I do have planning board right now. I wanted to have the footnotes on there, just requiring the setbacks. If the planning board doesn't want to review accessory apartments, we can just have CEO across the board for accessory
fine with
apartments.
that.
special zone.
I think that's fine, yeah.
And I'll keep the footnotes saying,
Yeah, we have code enforcement doing home occupations in both of those zones. And then in the next row up, I don't see any reason why it would be any different here.
Okay.
Makes sense to me.
And why is, so, yeah. And then short-term rental, why is that broken out like that? Like Airbnb could be 365 days a year. So what's the difference between that and a rental?
well. So with LD 2003, towns can, if they like, regulate short-term rentals. Again, if they like, the state hasn't given guidance on it, and I really have just thrown in an idea for what it would be, where if it's an owner occupied short-term rental, it's no different than a home occupation essentially. Someone will just pay a $25 fine. Make that note with the code enforcement officer, and that's pretty much it. But if it's someone who doesn't live in town and they're just buying up the whole house and renting it out as much as they can, then that would be treated more as a commercial business. They'd have the full site plan and everything going through the code enforcement officer. But that's again, just optional. That's me trying to do a watered down version of it. If the board doesn't want to pursue any of that, we can strike the stuff talking about short-term rentals. And the reason I have it broken the way it is, residential, commercial, general development, is just because it would be similar to how the commercial principal structures are already laid out, where limited commercial allows it, the planning board, general development allows it, the planning board. And then limited residential and resource protection allow it if you have certain exceptions, but it could also just as easily be home occupation. I'm just cautious when it comes to resource protection. That's pretty much it.
We think about that till the next meeting? I don't know what I think about that. You guys have a clear idea?
No.
I haven't heard of a town that had a solution for the short-term rental problem that really was equitable to all the different kind of scenarios that Max has just brought up. It's not an easy problem to solve, especially when you have a housing shortage like there seems to be in this area.
And that's why when it comes to short-term rentals, and when I've been talking with other towns about LT 2003, a lot of them have pretty much said, we understand it, but we'll give another committee tasked to deal with the short-term rental ordinance, and we just want to make sure we're ready for everything that LD 2003 will require. So if that's a decision by the board to just not do short-term rentals right now, or you want to have someone else be the one to take the hit, that's my job essentially. And that could
Take
just,
the hit?
yeah, just say, we don't want to put the short-term rentals in this land use ordinance, that's our decision. If you want to make a short-term ordinance, then go on, but you're putting your
Let
face on there.
the select board handle it.
Let the
That's what you're
select board-
saying?
Yeah.
Oh, this is
I-
like
I'm
wicked
not,
attractive.
no, I'm not saying that. That better not be reflected.
It's already been documented.
So, all right, so short term, we'll put a pin in that.
What are we doing?
Holding off on short term rental discussions, like. You can look at the stuff and.
Okay.
No final decision will be made.
Okay, good.
After that, on page 6-19. I just include some clarifying items for minimum lot size requirements. This. Would just give some examples for what someone would be expecting if they do an accessory apartment or if they do an affordable housing development. Yeah, because those are the lot size requirements outlined in LT 2003. Accessory apartment wouldn't require any additional minimum lot size, and affordable housing development would allow 2.5 times the base density. So it just gives some examples.
I like it. Nice and clear.
So if there's nothing on that. We're then on page 7-3. Minor tweaks. Rather than saying the 2002 National Electric Code, just say most up to date.
is this the language that's used in the Uniform Building Code?
I can check that.
Because last I knew, the main Uniform Building Code was using a rather old version of the National Electric Code.
Yeah, well, and that's why I'm saying most up to date. That's why I'm just saying most up to date, because I've had one or two people come in and say, hey, do I have to do 2002 or do I have to do 2020, 2021? It says 2002, but. Most update one. So. I can see if there's any conflicting language with that.
Mhm. Okay,
And then. And both of these do not have anything to do with LD 2003, they're just minor tweaks while we're doing the ordinance review. And then for 7.2.5, the International Energy Conservation Code. I don't know if we should say that that's a requirement or more of an optional item, but that's just from the Climate Resiliency Partnership with the state that I mentioned that the town would adopt something like that. But
I've never even heard of that code.
so I might. For a lot of the ones with this, what the state's saying for changing the ordinance to include these. I don't know if we want to just make them a flat out requirement. Or make them more of incentives for some developers, like we'll get into the parking in just a minute. So something like. Installing a charging station, but you wouldn't have to do as many parking spaces. Something like that. So I don't know if we want to do something similar for the energy conservation code, or if it turns out that's a bit more restrictive.
Well,
So-
what's the 7.2.3? I mean, both those things have to be in here.
The MUBEC one.
It has energy code.
MUBEC one does. And I think when I spoke with Stan, he said MUBEC has International Energy Conservation Code, but I will check with that. Yeah, no,
Energy code and energy conservation code are not the same thing.
yeah, when you got that look, I was like, maybe I need to double check this.
You don't happen to have a copy of the energy conservation code, do you?
Not on me in this meeting.
Yeah,
That I will,
I don't really want to buy the book for $150 to learn what it's all about before we.
I believe I have a link from what the state gave. So
Oh, okay.
I'll see if I can get that after.
Okay, thanks.
So those are just two updates. Again, not really LD 2003 related, but while we're doing the works. Then we'll jump to page 9-15, focusing on the minimum parking requirements. And really, there's only two changes. One would be including an affordable multifamily one. This is again what the state has for LD 2003. So it's someone who's proposing multifamily home can prove it's an affordable development project. They would only have to provide 2 parking spaces for every 3 affordable dwelling units.
What's the criteria, Max, for them proving it's affordable?
That
Is it due to a person's annual income or some percentage of it?
that
They gotta be below,
exactly.
that
be below it.
yeah, that would be new standards that are gonna be talked about in Article 10. 10.18.7.
We're almost there.
And it is essentially going into a 30-year covenant, guaranteeing that it's going to be based on.
Right.
income.
Okay.
Then the other parking item is just on page 9-16. Like I said earlier, this isn't LD 2003, but this could be a climate action item. Just saying that the minimum parking requirement could be reduced in lieu of promoting alternative transportation methods. And just giving some examples, like I say sidewalks or pedestrian pathways, but that would be more like extending them. Or if they are right along property anyways, using that. Reserving spots for carpooling, ride sharing, public transportation, and installation of EV charging stations. And I could add some additional language to just clarify, that would be more at the discretion of the planning board / CEO, whoever has the ruling on that. But that one's an optional one, that's not LD 2003.
It's a good idea. LEED certainly encourages you to do all of these same things. It strikes me as not particularly well defined. Like, as the board or the code enforcement officer, like, what do you use as a metric to determine, can I really cut down the parking? It kind of becomes a case by case decision, and like, how do you know that you're making a good decision on this issue? Especially in a town that has basically no public transportation.
Yeah, I'd like to think a little bit more about that. I should have paid more attention to this. When I was looking through this earlier. Just working my brain through the process of how each of those items would affect. What you would provide for parking, especially an EV.
Maybe one way to solve this would be to say, give a maximum percentage of parking that you could reduce. Versus what's required on the
10%
chart
or something.
Yeah, something like that. So you still have your incentive to, provide a walkable area or, your EV charging stations. And we don't wind up, building a high-rise apartment building with 10 parking spaces.
So like
Some way to
just
define
have
it.
something like a 10% reduction, maybe of.
I just popped up with that number just as a small percentage, but.
I was actually
arbitrary.
thinking the same thing. I mean, like, you sort of can't cut the parking down too much or you wind up creating a problem.
Well, it's a case by case basis. I mean, some of the stuff is seasonal or, there could be all kinds of good reasons.
Mhm.
Besides seasonal, I can't think of another one, but,
Maybe it could be up to a certain percentage. At the discretion of the planning board / CEO, whoever's approving. So that way, if it's someone who has 30 parking spaces required. But, and they say, oh, well, there's a sidewalk there, that's all it's needed, you may say, oh, well, that's fine, but there's still gonna be need for people to drive around, so we'll do 10% cut.
but, the way our thing is structured, it's like the restaurant is seating. You could have 30 people in the kitchen.
Mm.
Or you could have 2 people in the kitchen. I mean, we don't account for that, so it is kind of a case by case.
We allow,
basis.
we were okay with them chopping a couple spaces out of what we normally would require from the 80 grade development. Based on them just saying that, well, time after time, they're not using a large portion of the parking lot and because
Yeah.
of age and,
We did the same thing with Waldeboro Inn.
Yep.
You know, we let them have an occupancy with public parking spaces.
Well, with rents, with the contract.
And yes,
So
but
that's
even
still
still, like the rented spaces. With what they had plus the rented spaces, they
plus the staff, yeah.
didn't meet the minimum. Yeah, that's a hard one,
I know.
you know,
But again, it's not an LD 2003 one. We don't have to stay up all night worrying about this one. I can aim for this percentage language and, if we can get something, that's great. If not, then we can table it and just have more discussions about it later when we're not under deadline crunches.
works for me. I think it's a good idea. I think we should talk about more, but let's keep on moving for tonight.
Then we get into Article 10 and the specific deployment standards. This is where the fun begins. A lot for what you see with the accessory apartments is focused on verifying that opening paragraph, just to state that if someone's doing an accessory apartment, first of all, it could be an attached, built as new structure or developed in the existing structure. And if it meets those requirements, then it wouldn't have the additional density and only one accessory apartment be allowed. We can change that number, by the way. With LD 2003, we can have more accessory apartments. We can allow more units wherever we want. That's just an option if someone decides to say later, like, well, why don't we do 5 accessory apartments for fun?
Max, in the LD, when is that coming to fruition here? When does the town of Waldeboro have to abide by that?
So the state passed LD 1706, which means we have until July 1st of next year.
Okay, so it's not like it,
Unless there's another delay for some reason, which I don't see happening because we now
Right.
have these rules. in place.
So we're trying to get the LD 2003 language put into the land use ordinance for the June vote or the November vote.
It,
Depends on how fast we get it done, right?
I mean, Waldeboro's already gonna have to vote in November anyways for state referendums, the school. Is it that $81 million loan with the school?
All right.
So there's already gonna be people coming in here in November. We could have the ordinance ready by then. If not, June's fine.
Okay.
I figured we didn't have that much. We only had the pre-application, so I thought we had a lot more time.
So Max, when it's underlined, it's entirely new to our ordinance, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And this is just clarifying water and wastewater. It's either on the utility district or it's on the water system, or they're on their own private ones, but they have to prove that. Whether it's hooked up to the public systems or on the private one, it is sufficient to handle the accessory apartment. And then for setbacks, it has to meet the same setbacks as the single family dwelling unit that it's attached to or detached from. It's allowed on non-conforming lots, but it still must meet the setback requirements. And then this last one, 10.1.4, that's not specifically an LD 2003. However, I have had towns concerned where there is no parking requirement for an accessory apartment. So this would just pretty much say an accessory apartment doesn't require a unit, but since a single family is already going to have 2 parking spaces, give one of those to the accessory apartment essentially. We'll have this run by a legal team to make sure that that's
Oh, sorry, I was lost in thought there. Did you just skip down to 10.1.4?
yeah,
Okay.
that was me just saying that's the only non-LD 2003 item.
Okay. Yeah, I'm glad to see that the proof required for the septic and water now has a defined thing that they have to meet. That's great.
And just to save everyone some trouble with the reading, for what you see for 10.1.1 all the way down to 10.1.1.4. Those same paragraphs are gonna be in the other ones for the affordable housing units and for the additional single family units. Just to save you the trouble. It's the same thing. With that, is there any questions for the accessory apartments?
Nope.
And I saw somewhere it's maximum 800 square feet.
Um,
So,
yeah, that will be in the definitions.
yeah, okay.
And Rebecca, if you ever have any questions, feel free to just say. Hey.
Okay, so if it's above a garage, which is 40 by 20.
Yep.
That works. Okay.
And then it would skip ahead to 10.18.1.2 or page 10-21, where it starts talking about multifamily dwellings. This just clears up the language because there's already been the public and the private systems to cover the water and sewer. We don't have to be word for word when it comes to all this stuff, so we already have it in the ordinance. It's just different language.
So if someone builds a house and they dig a new well,
Mhm.
it's mandatory they get it tested. Is that what I unless I'm not?
Not
It must comply with standards outlined. What if the wells get like a bunch of arsenic in it? No, no.
Well, the water would be hold on. So which one are you reading?
10.18.1.2, it says hydrological assessment and the red it goes, the development must comply with standard outlined. Any
In-
testing of existing well or proposed well must indicate the water supply is potable and acceptable for domestic use. When the application is presented to the planning, so there's got to be some testing that proves the water is
Yes,
good.
well, and this is for
Okay.
multifamily, but that would be the case for accessory apartments
Okay.
and the single family dwellings once you go once you go past one. Um. And then under this multifamily, there's the addition of 10.18.7, which goes over the affordable housing development projects.
Mhm.
So this is what you brought up, or this was what we're asking about later. It outlines what would be required for someone to prove to get those benefits that I was talking about. Base density, the less parking spaces. And it does split between rental housing versus ownership. Covenant would have to be in the registry of deeds for 30 years. It would have to be in a multifamily location that's also in the growth area, which is what we determined through the comprehensive plan. So if anyone's curious what that means, it's anywhere on Route 1 or the village area, pretty much. So residential district, rural district, those are the only two places where it can't happen. And then once we get to multifamily,
Where
Right.
what can't happen?
the affordable housing. So for that to happen,
Can't have it in a growth zone?
no, it would have to be in growth.
Oh, okay, I thought you said can't be in a growth.
Yeah, so it would have to be in a place where the comprehensive plan said it was a growth area. Which is pretty much anything that's not the residential or rural districts. And it would have to be in an area where multifamily housing is allowed. So for Waldeboro, that's every place except the industrial district. So someone can come in and do an affordable housing project anywhere that's not residential or rural or industrial, pretty much. But they'd still have to prove that they can meet the base density, they're gonna be on enough water and sewer.
Yeah.
They have enough lands, they have to still prove all of that, so.
And does the town of Waldeboro, Max, excuse me?
Yeah.
Have a number, because it's just the rental property is below 80% of the local area median income at the time of the initial occupancy. So does the town of Waldeboro have a number of what the median income is?
We would have that when someone does apply for it, but that number's changing.
They
That number
change,
changes
okay.
almost every year.
So that,
Federal government determines that.
you're right, the federal, okay.
I think it's like HUD does that, right?
Local area meet. Yeah, federal, we would also probably talk to Maine Housing about that.
Okay.
But we get the numbers for those. Okay. And for the 10.18.7.3. Up until the asterisk, that's a LD 2003 item. After the asterisk, it's something I would like to see if that's possible, and it's just saying that developers proposing to rely on municipal parking areas would provide financial assistance for maintenance and upkeep.
It's a good idea.
I've had, when I talked to some towns about this, their immediate concern was on-street parking or using up municipal parking lots and saying, we can't say no to it. And I'm like, well, not necessarily, because you just can't say no, they can't park there. It doesn't mean you can't still put a standard or two.
You still have to require, you can still require them to provide the amount of off-street parking.
Right.
That's you, but you can't forbid people from using on-street parking.
Or municipal parking spaces in general.
So the concept here is that, again, on a case-by-case basis, we would negotiate this with the developer.
The financial assistance item or,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that would be something where the developer comes in if they say, I'm gonna build 10 units, let's say 10 units next to the Sylvania site. And I'm gonna have all my parking done at the Sylvania site. Then that would be something that's negotiated where we'd probably see how much it costs to plow it, how much it costs to upkeep it, and then.
Sort out some deal or prorate it with the developer.
Again, that's the only item that's not required for LD 2003, so.
Seems reasonable to me.
Are there any other questions for affordable housing?
No.
So then next, I have 10.37. These would be new specific standards. I'm just calling it dwelling unit allowance. So this is the interesting one with LD 2003. So in those growth areas that I just mentioned, someone could take an undeveloped lot and build up to 4 dwelling units, assuming that again, they have enough land, they have enough sewer, water, or private systems. So let's say in the village district, for example, where it's 5,000 square feet, if you're on sewer and water. Someone could take an undeveloped land, and as long as it's 20,000 square feet, they could put 4 units on there. As long as the sewer and water system can handle it. And if it's outside the growth area, if it's an undeveloped lot outside the growth area, it would be 2 dwelling units. So rural and residential, if there's an undeveloped lot, 2 units could be on there as long as there's enough land and there's enough private septic water.
Designated growth areas. Do we have those on the map?
Those would be in the comprehensive plan and, well, they're outlined in the comprehensive plan. And I can, and I can ask for a map to be made when we're implementing this, if
I
that
think
helps.
that's a really good idea.
So the purpose of 10.37 is to encourage denser growth in these growth areas, denser development in growth areas.
That's the focus for LD 2003, to just encourage more housing development in general. And when it was created, this recommendation was, how do you do it in a town? And it was 2 ideas. One is the growth area where town's already saying their comprehensive plan, that's where we want to see more growth. And then the more rural areas where there's still a lot of land. But it might not have all the systems. And the state adopted the language to say, well, in the growth area, let's try and get as much high density as we can. But still allow people to do more development in the rural areas, but just not as much.
So will the state, when they bring this down, does that trump the towns, whatever we decide as far as those parameters? Because it's, I know it says not in LD 2003, but will the state next, you said possibly July, can they have a whole different set of parameters about all of this density and all that, and the town would have to maybe
So you
do some of the stuff?
Definition in 15.
So we,
Oh, it's in this
It's
recent
right here.
batch. Okay, great.
so
Yeah.
by July 1st of next year, the state's looking at our ordinance and making sure that most of the stuff I haven't read is in there.
Yeah.
If it's not in there, then we get into this legal question where someone comes into my office and they present a plan saying, I want to build, I guess, another Volunteers of America project, another 80 Gray style project, but over here instead and have, you know, the 23 parking spaces and this and that, all those things for affordable housing. And if we don't have it on the books by then this planning board can say, well, no, we can't approve it because X, Y, Z. But then that developer will say, well, that's not what the state law says, so I'm
Right,
appealing it.
that's what I'm getting at.
On the other hand, we may say, oh, well, we don't have it in the ordinance, but the state requires it, so we're gonna approve it. And then we have a resident saying, well, that's not what the local ordinance says, so I'm gonna appeal it. And then it's a court matter at that point. And that's just it. We haven't gone to the court phase of it.
Yeah, I see.
So that's the fun with LD 2003. And I can get some visuals. People would like to see how 10.37 works for the 4 units, 2 units, and how the, you know, whether it's developed as a unit already, just to help explain that.
I guess,
Okay,
I've got some questions for you on 10.37.4.
yes.
So. I guess the first question is, what is the intent of 10.37.4?
So LD 2003 outlines that. For the 4 dwelling units. That would only be if that lot is undeveloped by July 1st, 2024. So if I have someone come in and say, well, I have this spot right here, but there's a decrepit. Let's take Benny's, for example. Let's say someone comes into my office and says, I want to build 4 dwelling units there by tearing down Benny's. You could look at it as, well, that's 4 dwelling units, but it's already a developed lot. So can we still permit them to have 4 units there?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
And the state pretty
So
much,
you're trying to create a pathway to demolish troubled buildings and
well, the demolition item, that's something that the state kind of just passes on to us, similar to short-term rentals. They said, well, we don't have anything on the books for demolition, but if a town wants to have a pathway so that someone who has an already developed lot wants to still get those 4 units by saying it's an undeveloped lot, you can go ahead and do it. It's not gonna make us a fuss or anything. So that's why I
Okay.
have it there. It's an optional one. I could be more clear about it, saying that it's what did you say? Decrepit, or it's run down one. I could clarify that it's only gonna be applicable to that. I do have something saying that if it's in the historic village, that it still has to comply with the architectural standards, where if it's gonna be demolished and replaced.
I like that one. I'm confused about the next one. Applicant must obtain a third-party inspection from an engineer that the structure is not safe to occupy and provide cost estimate for rehab versus demolition to build new. The problem with,
Yeah, going to solve the Benny's problem with that requirement, just seems.
yeah, so, well, this is specifically.
Cracks Going through the wall.
This is specifically for historic, the historic district. So this is all under that paragraph. The reason that, like, I understand why you would put that, but doesn't it create a situation where you incentivize people to just let the roof fall in on the house and then say, oh, if
Now it's falling
the
in.
roof fell in, so like, there's no way I can afford to fix this now.
I mean. As I said, well, it's probably not what I said, but for the whole demolition item, that's something the state really didn't give us any guidance on. It's just me taking a shot at the dark of what people might want. I know with 80 gray. It was a long time of people saying, well, it's still structurally sound, you just gotta do a study on it, and. To me, it was, well, if they tear it down and still follow the historic village architectural standards. Does it matter? And as you say,
Right.
it might encourage more people to just say. Well, I'll just sit on it, and if it magically tears itself down one day, well, I can't help that.
Right, yeah, I mean, you're trying to incentivize, I mean, rebuilding the existing historic building, which is a great thing. I think that you're also creating a sort of a parallel path that leads to maybe having distressed buildings because, the planning board or the CEO won't approve it. Because people say it can be saved.
I don't mind removing that, what is it, 4.1.2 item. That might cause more problems.
Would that be with the Hox's house? Would they have they already done that? And
I don't have,
Like
I don't have, yeah, I don't have a
that-
proposal to solve
Somebody
it.
with a really long business plan.
I mean, this would just be.
okay, because I'm wondering,
Well, and the demolition would be for any structure, it doesn't even have.
doesn't even have to be the.
Historic village.
Who owns Benny's? Does Benny still own it?
I know who it is, it's the,
Mushroom guy?
no, it's the. The wife of the former. So. Should I strike out a 4.1.2 item?
I'd like to put a question mark next to it.
Question mark.
Because this is specifically for the historic section, right?
Right.
That would be for the historic specifically, yeah.
Yeah, so.
So. It's a demolition permit, which means that it would never come before the planning board. Code enforcement officer would handle that, right?
Actually. You reminded me of something else that Stan told me about. We should have something in the land use ordinance. Actually talking about demolition permits and everything, because we don't actually have that.
Yeah, I was really surprised to learn that there was no demolition permit required here.
So that's actually something I'm gonna make a note of and put in the. demo permit. I mean,
So I'm just trying to remember, approving anything in the historic village. Does all of that come before the planning board? Am I remembering that correctly?
not everything, so. I mean,
Historic village, there you go.
in terms of the residential uses that we're talking about, multifamily, that would go before the planning board. But the single family, for example, that would be. Single family and duplexes, that would just be the code enforcement officer.
We're specifically talking here about multifamily, aren't we? In 10 points, in section 10,
10.37.
section 10 altogether. No, we're not.
So,
10.37 is not multifamily.
right,
Okay,
that would be if someone's building single family dwellings, which is something I still have to have clarified by the state, because. They're saying that you could build 3 or more dwelling units. And that would still be single family as opposed to multifamily.
Yeah, it's 4 units. That's the threshold, right?
Yeah, multifamily is 3, which is why I'm confused where,
Oh,
so
Yeah.
it's interesting.
Anything above a duplex, I guess, so.
So that's something I still have to clarify with the state about that item.
Yeah.
Reading just the text of 4.1.2.
Mhm.
You don't have to provide an accurate cost estimate. You just have to provide a cost estimate. I think that the practical matter here is that if you want to prove that demolition and building new is cheaper than rehabbing it, you can just prove that with an estimate.
So get rid of that third party inspection item, just say applicant must provide cost estimate. Well, and Barbara said maybe just put a question mark.
Well, my question is. Is that the? Why is the cost difference? A concern for us anyways?
I think we're just trying to slow the process of losing old buildings down, right? Is that what we're trying to do?
Or at least incentivize people to rehab them.
I think it's more of just showing that if how much it might be as a difference to try and save it. Like if someone says, oh, it's gonna cost, it doesn't cost that much to try and save, but it's like what's happening in Thompson with the Frank Woods Bridge. I don't know how many people,
No, I don't know anything about.
I've had to grow up with this issue. Because this was when I was still in high school. The argument was there's a bridge connecting Thompson, Brunswick. Built during the Great Depression, it's a dime a dozen bridge. And the argument was, well, it's historic, you should save it. DOT has instead said, no, it's not historic, it's a bridge. We want to tear it down, we want to build like an open space one and have bike lanes, we want to make it safe because it's already falling apart. And it's been in legal heck for about 10 to 12 years, because the argument is, oh, well, if you just do a proper study, you'll see that it's just as expensive to save it, and then you save it for another 50 years. To which they say, no, here's our study showing the exact opposites. And at least that helps in the court system.
So. Taking sort of extrapolating what you're saying to this issue. You're potentially putting the town into a position where we're saying, no, you can't tear your building down, the building that you own. Because we think that you can renovate it. And their response is going to be, we'll see you in court. And then. Like, why is the town picking that fight? Or is the town really gonna lawyer up and brawl with a property owner and try to force them to renovate a building? Like, that doesn't seem like a thing the town is gonna wanna do.
Well, I have that for the architectural standards, and maybe that's gonna be a bigger conversation to have with 7.4. Where. Every reasonable effort shall be made to provide compatible use for the property, which requires minimal alterations to building structure, site, and its environment, or to use property as originally intended. So if someone comes back and says, well, we could try and rehabilitate the building, it's a $50 difference. It's not gonna be a $50 difference, but it's slightly more expensive. Then tying that to the demolition item could be, well. You could make that effort. But I do see.
Every reasonable effort is,
I do see your point, and that's why I'm saying maybe. It's not just this, it's also the architecture, the 7.4, having a relook, because. You've raised the point on with when you're doing 80 grade, maybe looking at those standards as well to have something a bit more solid.
honestly, I think that, 7.4.1. Accomplishes the goal. That you're seeking in 10.37.4.1.2. Like, I don't see why we need to define a path for someone. When we've already said every reasonable effort must be made.
Okay.
You know, does that make sense to people?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's strike 4.1.2.
Does,
Then just to wrap up Article 10, since I know it's getting to 8 o'clock, the rest of it's gonna be definitions. For 10.37.6 and 10.38. Those are again just some short-term rental items. That's only if we want to try and do something with it. If, from what I heard earlier. Probably not gonna make a definitive thought on short-term rentals now. It might be something that we just decide to not do. Because it's that much of a football. And honestly, it's just me taking a stab out of this. This is not state guidelines. This is me just guessing. If you don't want to do short-term rentals, I can strike everything from 10.37.6 down.
Well, I don't think we have to settle at this moment, but I think to kick the can down the highway is kind of, that's not. I mean, you should accept the challenge to try to figure something out, because that's gonna be a problem getting bigger and bigger as, the time goes by.
Mhm.
So to just say, well, no, we're not gonna even discuss it or come up with anything or whatever, I don't think that that's in my way of thinking is appropriate.
I tend to agree, but I also don't think that I have enough knowledge to really make an informed decision about this at this point. Like, I'm with you. Like,
Yeah.
I think that we could come up with something that makes sense, and knowing, that there's a housing shortage, and knowing that other towns have an issue where, a lot of housing stock is basically being used as short-term rentals, and it's
Yeah.
driving up the rent prices for everybody else in town.
And
Like,
know
I
that-
think there's probably a middle
Yeah.
ground that can be struck that makes sense for Waldeboro.
And I think this is completely apples and oranges, but my daughter and my grandkids live in Portland, so I know about that whole
Mhm.
polygon there, so. I just think it's important to not to shirk the tough issues, but to address them in a measured, competent and intelligent way, so.
I actually have a coworker who put together a housing story that goes over some of the short-term rentals, the changes that have happened in the region. I could probably get that for a future. meeting.
Yeah. That'd be fantastic.
Good background stuff.
If the next meeting is not that much on the agenda. I'm gonna have to get the gavel if we have pre-applications like that.
Yeah, I keep trying to remind myself to set the ground rules for folks at the meeting so that we don't have so much chaos. And
I think you did a pretty good job.
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
Is that normal?
What?
Yeah.
we had tonight?
yeah, it is.
Okay.
Yeah, especially for subdivisions for some reason. We've had two of them and there was,
Neighbors.
yeah,
I even shared it with the Craig Hunter, like, he didn't give his name, but. I was telling him earlier, the subdivisions, there was the one case with Barbara, I don't know if you remember this case. But there was someone who was doing subdivision amendments up on Simon Road, where it was just one new line. I had people calling saying it was gonna be a mobile home park. That's probably why I really brought it up, saying, hey, once I said it was not a mobile home park, not just disease. It's because for some reason, people think a mobile home park is a subdivision.
Mhm.
oh,
Mm.
It's off on, that's it.
interesting, okay.
But anyways, I digress. So short-term rentals, first 10.37.6. I just have that limiting how many of your new dwelling units could be short-term rentals, just cap it at 50%. But it could be changed if the person does have a homestead exemption. That way, again, it's allowing someone who does live on the property, who just wants to do a short-term rental to make up some tax money on it. As long as they're already there and they're just trying to make up for taxes, then sure, let them do as many as they want. And then just limiting the number of short-term rentals in the shoreline to 1. I just put that in there because it's the shoreline. And then for 10.38. This is the 2-tier system that I was talking about, or at least a starter on it. Owner occupied, if they have a homestead exemption and they're maintaining that. Then the ownership has to do a home occupation review. And if the person doesn't have a homestead exemption, then the 4 requirements, parking space for each rental room. A floor plan is provided to show if more than 1 short-term rental unit is proposed. Having fire extinguishers on the sites and carbon monoxide meters. That's
Why is that in here and not just so the code enforcement officer won't know about if someone's, there's a short-term rental in their property, there's no reason for them to go get a permit right now, so that's why it's here.
Yeah.
But the fire extinguisher and the carbon monoxide,
when I was putting this together and I asked Stan, if we put some standards in, what would you want to see? Fire extinguisher, carbon monoxide detector.
Mhm.
That was mostly it. And then for the other items, parking spaces, the short and the floor plan, that's just what we have for bed and breakfast as well.
yeah, no, it makes sense, but and so the homestead exemption,
Yes.
I'm just wondering what the town knows about if there's a homestead, I mean, if people are.
Yeah.
A home office or whatever, they know that already?
The town would know if there's a homestead exemption on the property.
Yeah, okay. Okay,
But as I say, the short-term rental items, I don't mind tabling that. And I'll get the housing story for the next meeting. And then after that, it's just definitions.
we've got a typo in 15-2, you all know about that? At line 2 for owned housing. Comma, I think that's
Oh, yeah.
and development,
I think it's a development.
add development.
That
Yeah.
while we're
The development.
nitpicking
Yeah.
about typos,
Picky.
that there's also a typo on 10.37.4. I believe you meant the word build, not the word built.
Yep. That is what happens when I try and write this up 10 minutes before closing.
Hey, it's always easier to proofread other people's stuff than your own.
Spell check. So I do see it is 8:05.
Yeah,
I doubt when I go through all the definitions,
No.
that's probably something.
I don't think there's really much to
Anything.
talk about in there anyway, but why don't we
I think
move to adjourn and deal with that at a subsequent meeting.
is that a motion. perhaps?
I'd like to make a motion that we adjourn.
I'll second that.